Not. We are trusting God, or working on learning how to do it more effectively. One thing to say we are doing it, another thing to actually trust Him. Quick reviews, choosing to trust God, beginning in chapter 13 here, Psalm 42. Distraction, avoiding the contagion, this is the reflection of Christ, or God's response to us. Outward, Psalm 56, to know our limits, for Psalm 21, in regards to David. For man will swallow me up, he wrote, but to know that God is limitless. And those are easy points. We know that. I would imagine all of us know that we have limits. If not, let me take you back to North Carolina and hike back from the number 4 falls. Well, quickly be reminded of our limits. And we all know that God is limitless. We have, as far as if we were to do an essay on God's limits, we would all be able to respond, textbook answer, that God has no limits. He is able to do the impossible. But the challenge is when we fall into the very shoes of David in 1 Samuel 21, also then directed or recorded in Psalm 56, is the reality of when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, when the circumstances face us square in the face, and it appears as though man would swallow us up, that the imminent danger is there. Do we still remind ourselves that I can't fix this, I can't do this, this is not me pulling myself up from my own bootstraps and just determination and I'm going to get this done? But is it a reminder that this is God is going to do something? And again, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, it's not that he's necessarily going to remove us from the problem, but he will remind us of who his faithfulness in the midst of that problem. So that's Psalm 56. Choosing to trust God certainly requires faith, and the Holy Spirit's involvement there requires a willingness on our part. Again, it's not just merely saying the words or answering the essay, so to speak, in that regard, but truly being willing. But then also the responsibility that we have. Again, Psalm 34:4, the word sought means to tread as with the frequency and wearing out a path as we seek out our God. And the responsibility that we have in that regard. We also looked at the affirmation. I think it was for 2 weeks time. The point to know, we need to affirm in our minds God is trustworthy. Our affirmation should not be as the world claims as their affirmations of looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, we are wonderful, we are good, we will do this, we can accomplish this. What was that? I do everything with excellence. Looking in the mirror. The affirmation is not about us, but about me. And God is trustworthy. And the point that we can say about us is, left to myself, if I don't follow after my God's leading, I will always respond in a fleshly, sinful way. As I said, I'm not saying that our emotions are sinful necessarily. God created us with emotions. But we will respond in such a way that it's going to be in the flesh. We're going to respond in tears and anger and frustration and many times not pleasant words, perhaps, not pleasant thoughts. Maybe even we just clam up and don't say a word, or even have very many thoughts. However that works, many times our reactions, our responses are not God-honoring, and it's because I'm putting my trust in me, putting my my affirmation in who I am, instead of who God is. God is trustworthy, and that's if I'm not. Then the action that we need to do is that action of casting, not dictating, not keeping our hand on, but also not throwing and running in the opposite direction. That's not what the casting necessarily is, except for the sin, as my wife pointed out last time. So we are to run from sin, but the circumstances that God brings our way, those distractions many times that go in our way, a lot of times God is able to do great and mighty things through those if we would allow Him to do that through us. And the reason for the casting for He cares for you. And the ultimate concluding question was, what are our distractions and how are we responding to them? This week, as the book continues on, some pitfalls and trust. I think that was actually the title, the section title there, Pitfalls. I think there's a lot of times where, and we'll look at two, today we're only looking at one, but the book mentions 2 circumstances where basically things are going really bad or things are going pretty well, and many times those become pitfalls in our trust. This last week, not this week. I haven't been to work very much this week yet. Monday off. Last week, I was hearing about a death of a student. Can't remember now how old the person was. Driving, so 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there, but in high school. And this happened many years ago, back in the 90s. And so I was sharing kind of the details with my wife, and in this particular circumstance, I don't know that it's not a secret.
No. Secrets.
Yes.
No secret.
Celeste Hamilton, who's the pastor's wife in Wyoming, that's her sister. When her sister was in high school, they lived in Dunlap area. She was coming into town, I think, some sport event, cheerleading, basketball, something that she was involved with the high school. And I don't remember if that was before or after the combination. She may have been heading to Wyoming for all I know. I don't know where the high school was at that time. I don't know if they already combined. But anyway, story goes that she was coming into town. Speaking of the Spoon River bridges, she hit some ice on the bridge, slid the car, hit the guardrail, flipped the car over, landed upside down in the river. And from what I was told, obviously this is the 90s, we were not here yet. But from what I was told last week is that her cause of death was ultimately drowning. And that the impact was not necessary, there was no part of the accident that was fatal in essence. She didn't hit so hard that it would have killed her, but she hit hard enough that it's possible that she got knocked out. And but then landed upside down in the water, especially in cold water. If it's cold enough to have ice on the road. It wound up killing her. And my point being, as we were discussing that, I said, the thing is that as a father, that would be a challenge to know that my daughter crashed in such a way, in essence, drowned because there was nobody there to quick pull her out. That was certainly from human vantage point. Now we can't play God, so we don't know, but from the human vantage point, it was a survivable accident, except that it was possible that she was not alert and she's under the water. And I was trying to correlate that to, and I don't even remember which example I was going to go with. I think I was referring to Braden, if I'm not mistaken, Braden. And I completely lost his name. I couldn't remember, so I said, I think that one to a point would be a harder reality for a dad to face than knowing that your child was in an accident and looked at them instantly. No suffering, no pain. I never felt a thing. It was just gone. And I said, but it was, and I think I was actually snapping because I could not remember his name. And my wife started naming off all these families in this area that in the 17 years that we've been here, that have lost children in accidents, which sort of made me want to take my children's driver's license back and say, no, revoked. not doing that. But on the other hand, I began to realize how many families have suffered the loss of a child over so many years. And I can imagine that there would be times, regardless if it's an instantaneous or like this, you're not unconscious and drowning, that is really hard for a parent to go through. That's really hard for a grandparent, for an aunt, for an uncle, for siblings, who all involved to face. And yet, on the other side of the coin, is it any harder to trust God in those circumstances than it is in the good times? When things aren't falling apart, when the world isn't getting turned upside down, when the sheriff's deputy is knocking on their door with some very bad news. Is it harder to trust God then than it is in all the other times of life, all the routines of our life? And I think one of the pitfalls, as far as our book goes, and kind of want to expand on it here tonight, is learning how to trust God in those, as we would call them, again, this is from the human spectrum, because our God doesn't work in such ways that he's got good times and then he's gonna zap us with some bad times. He intends with, as we would call them, bad times. He intends those to be for our good. He intends for those to be for our learning, for our growth, for progress, for our movement forward in Him. And so there are times that when the fields are flooded, we call those bad times. God says, but I'm trying to do something good here. When the officer's at the door, we certainly would call that bad times. But our God calls those times that I'm going to show you who I am in an even clearer way if you will let me. But what about the good times? How can I trust my God in those good times? Psalm 16. It's a very interesting verse. We'll start in verse 1 of Psalm chapter 16. The psalmist, David, says in Psalm 16, verse 1, "Preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust." And great statement, great starting point. We can almost say it this way: as the race begins, David starts right out of the gates and says, in thee, O God, I will put my trust. And that ultimately should be our starting point as well. In thee, O Lord, I will put my trust. Verse 2, "O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, thou art my Lord, my goodness extendeth not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, and to the excellent in whom is all my delight. Their sorrows shall be multiplied that hasten after another God. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer, nor take up their names unto my lips. The Lord is the portion of mine inheritance, and of my cup thou maintainest my lot." The lines, here's the verse I want us to see. "The lines are fallen upon me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage." Verse 7, "I will bless the Lord that has given me counsel. My rings also instruct me in the night season." Let me just finish, because I was planning on stopping at verse 7, but we're so close. Let me finish the chapter. "I set the Lord always before me, because He's at my right hand. I shall not be moved." And going right back to verse 1. "Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also shall rest in hope. For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Thou wilt show me the path of life, and the presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore." Going back to that verse 6, the lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. And certainly that didn't always happen in David's life, where the lines are fallen in pleasant places. I don't know that I looked up what it says in the ESV. Is it similar to that? Exact. Lines are falling in pleasant places, falling onto me in pleasant places. It has the idea of a kind of a surveyor's rope, so to speak, a surveyor's line, and certainly, what am I trying to say? Ancestral rights, as they would have back in those days. Dad's land, grandpa's land, great grandpa's land, and it continues on now with my land, and then it'll be my kid's land, and trying to determine where my land is compared to the neighbor's land. And obviously part of the law was that they were not to move those landmarks, they were not to move those lot lines and kind of begin to infringe on your neighbor's lot. But the very reality that it is a command, the very reality of our human nature. You know the time that happened. Lot lines slowly got moved one way or the other, and it became necessary at times to reestablish where is the line actually. And this phrase here in verse 6 is similar to that, when kind of the picture being is now we're going to reconsider what is mine and what is theirs, and the line has fallen as such that this is very beneficial to me. This is good. I know that we shared this before, but a perfect illustration in regards to that very reality. Boy, it was just right after the fire here, wasn't it? Right after the fire. In fact, I think I had been in the basement kind of cleaning some things out. We had the dumpsters out here at the front, and sorting through things, trying to kind of conclude a inventory list, and all that was involved here. And I came out the back door over here, which I guess you call it back, front, whatever, this door, side door. And I think I was bringing some stuff to the dumpster, and I saw Spike Bennett, if you recall him, sit right there. He couldn't hear a thing. I don't think he ever heard a thing I said. But he came every Sunday night. He was parked across the street on this road, next block over, just sitting there, and he's looking at the church. And I went over that. I wasn't sure. I don't remember at the time if just how many weeks it had been after the fire, how much he knew about the fire. And so in my estimation, I figured he was here just to see what was left of the building. He's strongly considered this his, as he would call it, his little church. And I went over there thinking that I was going to console him, that, all is well, we're going to rebuild, this is going to be perfect, it's going to work. Have patience. Well, ultimately what he was doing over there is he was trying to figure out in his mind, keep in mind our house was still right here, taking up most of that green space right there. He was trying to figure out where he was going to build us a garage. Now I walked over there and I said, hey Spike, how's it going? He's like, you guys just need a garage. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put it. In my mind, I'm thinking there's so many things that we need, right? We need a building to meet in. We're meeting in the bank and in my dining room. We need a building. We don't need a garage. But anyway, he got it all figured out, and he had the money to the church to build a garage. So while this is being done, Kenny Musselman is building us a garage, which worked out actually better than I ever imagined. I thought it was kind of odd, and honestly, as far as my opinion went, I was fearing that the community was going to start thinking that we're doing, some insurance, questionable things with insurance, that suddenly our building catches on fire, and now we got a brand new garage and a new building. That what's going on there? But it worked out well as we began to buy some of these pews, all fit in that garage, and the pulpit, and just different things that we were buying. We were all sticking, just throwing them in the garage there, and preparing for, obviously can't move anything in here till the carpeting and all that was done. And so it worked out splendidly, more than I imagined, as I was trying to talk them out of spending the money for a garage when that was the least of our concerns at that moment. But anyway, right after they had poured the concrete pad on which the garage would fit, the house next door, Paul lives there now, he lived there then, but at that time he was a renter, and landlord was elsewhere. Now he actually owns the house. But at that time, the renter, the owner of the building, had driven by and saw his garage, and had stopped Kenny Musselman from building and said, I think you guys are encroaching on my lot line. And Kenny came to me and said, hey, I don't know what the details are here, but if this winds up being that we are on his lot line, this is bad news, because we could probably make the garage, just one car instead of two cars, but we had the concrete had already been poured, it had already been cured. He was already putting up the sides, and he said, this is basically, we have to go all the way back to the square one on figuring this out. And Kenny and I began to, he just kind of walked in. We obviously didn't own that far lot. We just bought that last year, or 2 years ago. We began to look around, where else can we put a garage? Where else, if this doesn't happen, what are we going to do with this garage? And in my mind, now I'm thinking, how am I going to tell Spike that we're not going to build this garage? He was a financial blessing, but he wasn't really all that easy to work with, because he had an idea. That's what had to be done, and there were no exceptions. There were no excuses. It was, this is what's going to happen. Whether you want it or not, you're going to get a garage. So that's what it is. Well, I remember with some anticipation. I remember we came, even as a church, like on a Wednesday night, we kind of discussed it and prayed about it, and sitting right there in our house, in our dining room that had the windows looking at the construction project right outside the windows. We prayed just that the Lord would do what only He could do. And it did the survey, and it turned out, and I know I've said this before, but it turned out that not only was their garage in the right spot, but their air conditioning unit was actually impinging on our lot line. So he only has a half a lot there, and we have the other half. And the lot line, from my understanding, was just a couple of feet from his air conditioning compressor, whatever that's called, the outside condenser, I guess. And technically by code, that's not supposed to be that way in town. And so the owners of the land, of the house, quickly backtrack. Never mind, we didn't bring this up. It's all good. Nothing to see here. Let's just keep moving on. And we could say then, literally, as David says, the lines are falling onto us in pleasant places. We weren't having to get some heavy equipment in here to break up big sections of concrete to figure out what to do with this garage. The line, literally the lot line, fell in the right spot for us. And what David is saying here is learning how to trust God when the lot lines are lining up. And that's really my first point here. When the lines fall, where the lines fall. When the lines fall in such a way that What a blessing. And I know that I hope we've all been able to acknowledge those times when God has done that in our lives. I hope we don't take that for granted, but we don't just miss that. But I would dare say there's been time and time again that if we had eyes that could see, we'd be able to acknowledge that God, time and time again, allows the lines to fall in pleasant places for us. And sometimes we just call it circumstance. Sometimes we just call it luck. We use that word. But we may not forget that it was God who did that. But yet David still says, after verse 6, he says this, I will bless the Lord. I will bless the Lord. Lines of, it's all working out for me right now. You know, it didn't always happen for David, but right now it seems to be working out pretty well for me. I'm going to bless you in that. I'm not going to just take it for granted. I'm not going to overlook your hand in this. I'm not going to acknowledge this as it's my due. Finally, something's working out good for me. I'm going to acknowledge your hand in this, that the lines have fallen in good places for me. Certainly, there are times when I have two illustrations. I don't think I have one for now. Let's say, as an example, employment. You lose your job, and you find kind of an emergency employment, and it winds up being that this new job that you never thought you were going to have ends up being better than the one you lost. And one scenario in that regard, health. But there are times when I'm certain that we've feared for the worst. I think a lot has to do with WebMD and other sources online where suddenly we have those aches and the pains, we sort shit out, and suddenly we are dying of 13 different fatal diseases. And we rush off to the doctor, hospital, clinic, whatever it might be, and we determine it really was not the case. And in our anxiety, in our frustration, in our what ifs, in our this is the end, in that regard, how often do we, as David said, I will bless the Lord. He began verse 1, I will trust the Lord. And he points out there are times when things fall in pleasant places for me, and I am not going to forget to bless him because of that. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3, I know we've referred to probably several times throughout this book and throughout this study, but Moses is restating their past, remind them of it. And in verse 3 it says, and he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger and fed thee with manna which thou knewest not, nor did thy fathers know, that he might make thee known that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. I think a lot of times those verses are taken, or that verse, one verse, somewhat confused in regards to its application, its interpretation. To remind us that we have to be reminded that we aren't alive because of our doing. We aren't alive because of the food and the waters that we drink. We aren't alive because of what we have accomplished, what we have set aside, what we have put into place. But as he points out, as Moses reminds them, hey, God brought you into the wilderness and took you away from everything, including food and water, so that you would be reminded that this is not about your hands. It's not about your handiwork. It's not about what you can do. It's not about the labors of the fruits of your labors, but the very reality that God has said, and therefore God will do. And the challenge in that regard, Deuteronomy chapter 6, we just referred to this not that long ago. In so many words, Moses reminds them to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind. In essence, to love them with their everything, and to obey his commands, and to teach them to their children. And there in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it's reiterated that as they're sitting, as they're going, that they continually to remind their children of all that God has done for them. Because the challenge, the casualty would be that as they came and lived in homes, and it seems like I just referenced this, live in homes that they did not build, and drank from wells that they did not dig, and enjoyed the fruits of the fields that they didn't plant, that they would forget God. Because the truth is when lines fall in pleasant places for us, it is easy for us to forget God. Not that we, that our minds somehow forget that He actually exists, that we forget to trust Him, we forget to acknowledge Him, we forget to thank Him, we forget, as David points out, to bless Him. And where the lines fall, trusting God in those times when the lines fall, when it's favorable to us. Secondly, and I'll say lastly, where the lines fall, trusting God, and where the prayers start. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. Again, it is easier to make the application of this verse. For all those instances when the in everything involves the tragedies, the knocks on the door, the late night phone calls, the medical diagnosis, the accidents on the road, the flooded fields that we are now living in, the leaking roof, and the list just keeps going on. Many times when we think of in everything give thanks, but the application many times for that verse is directed towards those things that we don't like to be thankful for, we are to be thankful for. But the in everything is not just about those big disasters that we need to learn how to be thankful for, but it's in those, the lines of falling in pleasant places. I still need to give thanks to my God. I still need to pray in thanksgiving to my God. There's a quote, I have it up there, from the book. To the extent to which we genuinely thank God for the blessings He does provide is an our indicator of our trust in Him. And that's a humbling statement there from that chapter. To the extent to which we genuinely thank God for His blessings, the blessings that He's given to us, the blessings that He's provided for us, the answers of prayer that maybe He answered before we even prayed. All those blessings that God has given to us and fall upon us, to the extent that we genuinely thank Him, is to the same extent that we actually trusted Him in us. And so when God does great things for us, and those lines fall in pleasant places, and we don't thank Him, we neglect to give thanks to Him, we neglect to direct our focus to Him as a giver and sustainer, it's indicating that in those circumstances we weren't trusting Him, but we were trusting circumstances. We were trusting, it's about times when it worked out for me. We were trusting our own abilities. We were trusting our own means. And let's do that again. To the extent to which we genuinely thank God for the blessings He does provide is an indicator of our trust in Him. God gives something great for us. And honestly, great, again, we don't have to go to the far extremes. It doesn't necessarily mean that a brand new car suddenly appeared in our driveway. Where'd that come from? Oh, it must have been God. But the great could be that we made it to work without getting in an accident. And how many times, I guess we could say it this way, how many times have you been driving? And ahead of you, from our vantage point, from behind, we can see that the course has been set that something not good is going to happen very soon. This is not a good situation. There's been many times when we've been driving, we've been doing a lot of driving, it seems like lately. There's a lot of times that something will be going on in front of me and I'll immediately start slowing down. And I'm not sure what's going to happen or where it's going to happen, but something looks like it's about to happen. And I don't want to be a part of that happening. So I'll start slowing down. And it doesn't happen. There may be two vehicles on course to do some very damaging things to each other. And, someone's, can I get on a soapbox? And the law says don't text and drive. Someone's texting and driving. And suddenly you're crossing the line and they're completely oblivious. And here I am, 2 cars or 3 cars back, and I see this car, here's a car in front of us heading, say north, and there's a car coming south. And suddenly they begin to cross the line, and you can see, I'm close enough that I can see, they're doing something on their phone, they're doing something in their lap, they're doing something that they're not looking up. And I hit the brakes. I'm thinking, this is going to be bad. This is not going to be good. We're not going to want to see this. This is getting away. And at the last second, they look up, they realize, oh, and swerve back. And then my next fear is now they're going to overcorrect. They're going to hit the ditch. They're going to roll. Now it's going to be us instead of the car in front of. Lord, you could have just taken them out and said, but then it all works out. And I can't tell you how many times I have seen that happen. when we lived in Greenville. That was obviously back in '99. Some of the worst drivers I've ever seen in the country lived in Greenville. And I don't think it had anything to do with cell phones. This was the late '90s, and I don't think most of those rednecks even knew what cell phones were yet at that time. They just were horrible drivers. And literally, we'd be driving down an interstate, let's say like 94 out by Peoria, but this is obviously in Greenville area. And someone drives off the road, and they don't even slow down. No brake lights come on. They just continue doing 70 miles an hour in the ditch, in the median. And then they just make their way back up onto the road. It's like a cloud of dust as they do that. And I can't tell you how many times I was driving in the Greenville area thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. This is not going to be good.
Did they can ask her for that?
Just like there's a bunch of Dale Earnhardts that are out there. And sure enough, they come sliding back right into their lane as if nothing happened. And I think, the Northern Yankees could never pull that off. We would have had a 37-car pile up. That's what we do in Chicago. That's just their normal routine. And in fact, I do recall somebody was on their cell phone. He was right in front of us, went into the ditch. And because he's doing this, we're not coming up alongside him. I look over, he's on his phone just talking away.
Happy.
And he was happy. His arms, he was just talking away, and I'm thinking, you're not on the road anymore. You are in the median. You are in the ditch. The road is like this down into the gully. If it would have been this season, it would have been full of water at that point. He's just driving on, just talking away. And I stepped on these to get ahead of that guy. I had no idea and I'd seen Dale Earnhardt drivers do this so many times. I got far ahead of him, and I'm watching my mirror. He just still on the phone. Just steers back up onto the road and keeps on going. What? They either need to teach Chicago drivers how to do stuff like that, or maybe they just stop doing that. It's probably the better option. But nonetheless, how many times can we see in the lives of others, that should have been bad? It wasn't. But how many times do we acknowledge it in our own lives? That could have been very bad, but it wasn't. I'm going to bless my Lord for that. I'm going to give thanks for him for that. I'm not going to give the credit to someone looked up just in the nick of time and got back into their lane. I'm not going to credit that to the rain stopped falling and the fields finally dried out. I'm not going to credit that to the circumstances that happened. I'm going to credit that to my God. And because if I begin to enjoy all the benefits that God gives me without giving the acknowledgement of the God that gave them to me, I will be no different than the children of Israel, who lived in houses they didn't build, from drinking from wells they didn't dig, and enjoyed the fruits of the fields of which they didn't plant, and forgot their God. Trusting God in the good times, when the lines fall, in pleasant places for me. And the question we ask them, when did the prayer start? When is it that we are thankful? Ecclesiastes 7:14. The day of prosperity, be joyful. But in the day of adversity, consider God also has set the one over against the other, to that end, that man should find nothing after him. Let me give a New Storm paraphrase of Ecclesiastes 7:14. Be thankful both for the good and the bad, realizing that God uses both, so that as we face those circumstances, both good and bad, that we find nothing but God in it. And I think it's easier, like I say this, I think there's times when it's easier when the circumstances are bad that we can see God. I think that sometimes it's easier to do that. Things are going well, or things are not going well, but we can see God's hand. Again, many people have said that. Things have just not gone well. And Julie has an example we were just mentioning. Obviously, going through a heart transplant is not something that you normally consider well, although that's better than not going through it in her case. But to be able to acknowledge, boy, I felt God's hand in that. I can sense him. I think sometimes it's easier for us to see it that way and acknowledge God in those than it is at times to acknowledge God in the pleasant places. And that line has fallen and things have worked out well. It's easy to just another blessing, another advantage, that's just life. It's all those other bad things we wish we could get rid of so you can have more of those things. But will we remind ourselves that God uses both, so that we who are facing both the good and the bad will find nothing but him in both the good and the bad. And may that be our desire as well. Sometimes I think we look at life as a series of good and bads, uphills and downhills, and so much so that we never know what is next. And I've said this before, but I think I'm thankful for that. I can't imagine what life would be like if we always knew what was next. If we always knew when the next tragedy is going to face us, what would we do? If we knew that we'd have to wait another 3 weeks before the next blessing, what would we do? And so I'm thankful that our vantage point is such that we don't know what's going to happen. Not one of us knows what's going to happen even on our ride home from church. But to be able to live such a life that we're completely dependent upon our God in our ignorance, in our not knowing, that good or bad, we will bless our Lord. Good or bad, in everything we will be giving thanks in prayer to our God for what He has done. Trusting God in those good times. Those good times certainly can be a pitfall of our trust. Again, we probably wouldn't necessarily say it. We wouldn't necessarily say in our good times that, I'm not trusting God, I don't want to trust God. But by our negligence, by our forgetfulness, by just following the routines of life, I think we can easily forget God. Let me read that quote again. This is a great quote. To the extent to which we genuinely thank God for His blessings He does provide is an indicator of our trust in Him. Challenging God. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank You again for who You are. I thank You for the fact that You are a trustworthy God, that You are there, that You are working, that You are alive, powerful and controlling. Even the king's heart's in Your hands, and certainly ours are so much more so as well. We thank You for that. I do pray that we remind ourselves to acknowledge You when we are living in those homes we didn't build, when we're drinking those wells we didn't dig, when we're enjoying the crops from the fields that we didn't plant, when the line seems to have fallen upon us in very pleasant places. I pray that we'd be reminded to bless You, as David said, to give thanks in everything, as Paul says. And I pray that we need to honor You with our lives in those sometimes difficult times, to actually trust You, to acknowledge You. I pray that we continue to see You. And we thank You for it. In Jesus' name, amen. I didn't ask if anybody had any comments before we close.
Thinking about what you mentioned about the highs and lows, and be nice if you knew what's going to happen after tomorrow, and you're constantly thinking about what your daily bread is. You're thankful for your daily bread because maybe that's the way God wants it for you, not to be.
Yes.
You trust Him each day, but those thinking specifically about those ups and downs and where you prioritize what is a really good day. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a new car or a promotion or something like that. Sometimes you're thankful since He was gracious.
Yes.
You wake up and you think about all the things that you have to do today and all the heaviness of today, and you have no idea how I'm going to get here tonight. And you get there at night and you think, no idea how I got here.
Exactly.
But you're thankful.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be something big. It
Correct.
just has to be that He cared enough for you today that He loves you and loves your children more than you can possibly love them, and
Correct.
hope to care for them.
Correct. Yes. Here an illustration about Mr. Cole. He's not here tonight, but kind of one that I thought of as Joe was speaking. As we often will ask for praise is something we're thankful for. Mr. Cole was often one, especially back a decade or so. He was always one to share things. And I noticed as he got older that his examples were not always as, what I'm trying to say is, not as phenomenal as they once were. If I could say it that way. I'm not negating Mr. Cole by any means, for sure. But he used to give, these just things that wow, some, what do you call them? God, no, what did he call them? Nuggets. Just some nuggets that God was doing in his life. And as we got older, and even like our Thanksgiving services, and we try to encourage people to give thanks, sometimes his what he was thankful for just seemed to be not as big as they once were. But as you consider this challenge, the truth is we ought to do more of that. Though that's what it's more difficult. And I think as you get older, you begin to, boy, every day. Like you said, I made it.
Getting older?
I made it. Yeah, exactly. we we got to another end of the day, and I'm praising God for that. And certainly, I think that's a perspective that changes as you get older, perhaps. But that's something certainly that I noticed Mr. Colt. He used to give some phenomenal just illustrations of throughout the last year that God had done, and it's like, wow! And you kind of almost couldn't wait. He'd read his poems and all those other things, but then he'd give an illustration of something God had done in that last year, and kind of anticipated, waiting for it, and then suddenly his points began to get simpler and simpler and simpler, and kind of missed those big, exciting illustrations, Mr. Cole. But the truth is we should all be like that. We should all be just, hey, we have something we're thankful for. Yes, I'm thankful. God gave me another day of breath to breathe. God gave me this to accomplish. God did this for me. And it's not, moving mountains, so to speak. But if God didn't do it, it would have been a very large mountain in front of me. And just a reminder again, ups and downs, but to be thankful in all things.
That leads me to a sentence I had highlighted in the book. Comes shortly after this one. It says, we ought to be as earnest and frequent in our prayers of thanksgiving when the cupboard is full as we would be in our prayers of supplication if the cupboards were bare.
Yes.
And I was just struck, I'm thankful for this lesson because I was struck with, and it's not just, dear Lord, thank you for our food, but that the heartfelt, it's what everyone's saying, but when I open the cupboard, I should be overwhelmed with, thank you, Lord.
Yes.
Because we all know weeks where there's less in the cupboards, and there's weeks where there's more, but we should be thankful for both. And we know how earnestly we pray when we have a need. It doesn't have to be cupboards, but have a need. But how am I giving thanks when that need is part? This was a great lesson, but that really struck me. I'm like, as earnest in my prayer when my cupboard's full because God filled it, as I am when it's not and I have need.
Correct.
It's a great lesson.
That makes me think of obviously we live in an age of entitlement where everybody's
Yes.
entitled to something, and everybody thinks to a certain extent treats God like that and thinks that, what is he doing for you? And then if you realize, wait, it's all he's done for you, it's just like you shouldn't be expecting anything from him. And
Yes.
it just really brings you back to what you're thankful for. And it's not about something you're expecting because you shouldn't be expecting.
Yes.
Probably all of us know that amazing feeling when you start to give thanks. You can't stop because God's blessed us. Because it's not all that our lives are so full of blessings that we have no lack, truly,
Correct.
if we focus on all He's given us, because
Correct.
He's given us what we need.
Yes.
It's our focus.
Yes. Lest we forget, lest we stop trusting, lest we neglect our God who has blessed us in so many ways. Again, not the pitfall, I think. A challenge to our trust is when the lines have fallen in pleasant places for us.
One thing that I've been thinking about as you've been talking about pleasant places and good times and tough times, I stumbled across some records I took decades ago when you and your brothers were in elementary school, and things were tough financially, and we did a lot of praying for different kinds of needs. And I had kept a list, but I stumbled across it a couple months ago. I didn't even remember that I had written this stuff down, but sometimes when things are going really well, or you think they're going really well, it's good to remind yourself of what God has done in the past, because
Yes.
He's still God.
Yes.
And these were, sometimes it was as small as somebody put $20 on our tuition for their school. Sometimes it was an appliance, it was all kinds of different things. A bag of hand-me-down clothes for 4 little boys, whatever.
Yes.
But it was,
Yes.
just showed how God provided in so many different ways.
Correct.
He can still do that.
And He still does, yes. Learn to trust Him. Quick reminder Sunday, grilling. Where are we grilling?
Hamburgers and bratwurst.
Hamburgers and bratwurst is fairly well we're grilling. And so I'll the accessories that go along with that would be wonderful. Sometime I bet we have to wait another month and a half or so before sweet corn winds up being in season, right?
If they ever get it planted.
If they ever get it planted, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think about that the other day about how corn always is way beyond knee high by 4th of July, and I don't know about this year.
No.
Those are few fields will take off.
Yeah, if they actually got it in the ground and the seed didn't get moldy or swept away, they could have a bumper crop this year with all this rain, but there's a lot of fields that haven't been planted yet.
Maybe watermelon. If you go to watermelon.
Watermelon, this would be good. We'll be here for watermelon and what is it, cranberries?
Yeah,
Cranberries would be, suddenly we see cranberries being planted in the fields out there. It's a cover crop that we were listening to.
Why didn't we think of that?
That's right. But I have, we dismissed.